people here who have tuned in to listen today. You're with us for another episode of FSUFO, also known as Forbidden Science. And today we have a very special episode, which I think is a little different from many of our guests in terms of the scope and how it ties in with the theme of UFOs, which is central to us. Today, our guest is the Reverend Michael Carter. And this is, I have to say right up front here, this was a suggestion of Justin Brown's. And I don't know why I had suggested it earlier, because there were some other people and aspects here I'd love to get into. I'm going to put the pressure right on Justin Brown here at the start, though, and ask him, Justin, are you a person of faith?
Actually, my mother was very religious growing up, and I was a part of a number of different religious denominations of different churches, and so I sort of grew up in that culture. A little different than yours, so I do have a foundation in that, but I wouldn't consider myself a religious person per se. Now, I do
Hmm.
practice mindfulness and prayer and things like that, some meditation from time to time. I consider myself more of a spiritual person, I suppose.
I think that's fair. I think spirituality itself, there, as opposed to religion, covers much more ground. And, you know, uh, many people might not be religious, but are spiritual. I myself, for anyone who doesn't know out there by now, am, I suppose, what many would call a fallen Catholic. I went through private Catholic school and that, and all the baggage that goes with it. But what it has taught me, what I have retained from that, is a great respect of all religion, of all spirituality. And our guest today, I think, is going to help us explore that, and particularly perhaps the connection to the UFO phenomenon in a way that I think is overdue on this show. And since you made the suggestions and since you had the initial contact with Reverend Michael there, why don't we get you to bring him in there, Justin, and make him welcome, and we'll get underway and delve into all things UFO and spiritual and beyond, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Reverend Michael Carter, he just exudes joy. There he is. You'll feel it when we speak today. And he's got a really fantastic and interesting history that spans his interest in, religion and but also that of UFOs and Broadway and the whole shebang. So I'm really, really grateful and excited and thankful that you've made time for us today, Reverend Carter.
Oh,
Thank you.
anytime, please. What else am I doing? It's freezing here, and I do not want to venture out. I'm going to stay in, and I'm going to watch football, and maybe at a respectable hour, I may even pour myself a glass of wine later.
All
I,
right.
yeah, nothing heavy. I do have to be at work tomorrow. I'm glad we started out about religion and spirituality
Mm.
because they're not always the same thing, but they can be. That's
Hmm.
why I became a Unitarian Universalist. I was raised in the Baptist church tradition, and
Hmm.
the theology just didn't work for me anymore. But I know very um, deeply moral, ethical, religious people, and so that's when I see that they are the same. When religion becomes dogmatic and dysfunctional. And that's why you're seeing many people not going to churches, saying I can find my way in nature or or more eclectic kind of spiritual practices. I'm not a very religious person myself, and that's why I can make my home in the Unitarian Universalist tent. However, I don't want us to think that all religious people somehow don't get it and all the spiritual people do, because we know that that's not necessarily true as well.
Mhm.
Um, but as far as this whole melding of science and religion, I think one of the things that the UFO phenomenon is can open us up to is that a lot of these beings have not only technological prowess, but a lot of them are deeply spiritual. There's literature to attest to that, and if you talk to other experiencers, so it's kind of this melding of the material, I put that in quotes, and the spiritual, because it's
Mhm.
possible to be able to have both.
Yeah, and before we get into that whole aspect of UFOs and contact, because right out of the gate, I want to let everybody know here that I didn't even realize till after I invited you onto the show that you are also a contactee of sorts. And we'll get into
Yes,
those
yes.
experiences as an experiencer. And I want to get into that. It's very exciting stuff. But I think we should sort of maybe backtrack a little bit because I think it's really important for us to understand too the Black community's perspective on your connection with the church and UFOs. You know, the
Yeah,
Black culture is very religious centered a lot in a lot of ways for a lot of great reasons.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I most shows that I'm on, I don't know whether someone maybe they're afraid of saying the wrong thing or can veer off. I can't speak for 60 million people who identify as African American. What I do know from my own experience is that, and because Jesus is so central to the narrative that when we came over here as slaves, and so we kind of adapted the Judeo-Christian narrative of the Exodus, being strangers in a strange land, being discriminated, marginalized, oppressed here in America, that we kind of lifted that narrative, and it fits right here, being in America.
Mhm.
Some people say Rome or Babylon, call it what you will.
Yeah.
But because Jesus, well, even without the UFO narrative, I'm in a denomination. It's predominantly European American, that history, what have you, very intellectual. We kind of said Jesus is a model, an example of how to live a committed life, but we're not bowing down to him.
Mhm.
So, in other words, we're saying he's not unique. Any God in Jesus, I'm using the word God in quotes, is in you and me and everybody else. That narrative is heretical to Orthodox Christianity of any color.
Mhm.
Jesus is unique. He is special. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be worthy of the good that comes in our lives. So, what I do, I belong to a denomination, and even if I didn't, I was veering away from that narrative when I left the Baptist tradition, that Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven, in his language, is within. So that means this is within me. I don't
Mhm.
have to look outside myself. And
Yeah,
so
I
that is heretical and it's hard. Now, if you say he's an astronaut
Mhm.
or he may be a hybrid, that pours salt in the wound, if you will. And so
Mhm.
it's been very difficult for a lot of people, not just African Americans, but especially to accept this this hypothesis, that without astronauts, without ET,
Mhm.
that hey, no, Jesus, who do you think you are? And even Jesus got in trouble, saying I and the Father are one. I mean, they wanted to kill him because they thought it was he was, what is he talking about? He's insane. His ego is out of control. But any God, any part of the universe, I'm part of it.
Mhm.
That's where I come from. That's where you and I come from. So not to acknowledge that, to me, would be the blasphemy. But
Mhm.
for religious folks, that is the blasphemy. Who are you making yourself out to be?
Mhm. And we're gonna
Does
talk
that
more about
make
your
sense? Does
concept.
that make sense?
It does make sense, and we're gonna talk
Yeah,
more about your grander picture of the creator too, because it will actually map right onto the UFO phenomenon in amazing ways. I've
sure.
got some great quotes I wanna use from your book, one of your books, and, but before we get there, what has been the Black community's response to the UFO phenomenon in general, in your opinion? And you being of a person of faith, right?
Um, yeah.
Any pushback?
Yeah. Well, for me, because my concept is so different. I'm not looking at God as a person up in the sky. I'm not looking at God as a person at all. It's harder for people to, um, because we're talking tradition here, and so I'm kind of bucking the tradition. So um, it's tenuous. It's hard for people to accept that, and that's okay. I'm too old to really kind of worry about it. I respect it. I come out of that. You can't hate the roots without hating the tree, as Malcolm X said. But I've just kind of found a different way to look at the cosmos, and it's more broad. It's respecting other paths that are not necessarily the one I've chosen. And so I think I won't say I'm an embarrassment, but it's just very different from the group think. And that's
Yeah.
okay because, it's um helped people of color survive everything we've had to go through in North America, and it's been the faith. It's been faith, however
Mhm.
you define that.
Yeah.
And so I respect it. I just see it in a different way. And for Jesus is my brother, so is Buddha, so is Joan of Arc, as my sister. There's a lot of paths. I just don't say that this is the one true path.
Yeah.
Is
And I
is
think
Am-
sorry,
is
Chris.
America ready to accept that Jesus wasn't white?
That's a great
Um,
question.
no, no,
Hmm.
Well,
no.
Jesus wasn't white. I
That's right.
think
Yeah.
that's
Exactly.
this.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
not.
yeah.
And at some
No, no.
point, all faith, and certainly America, where you have the history of slavery and of such a racial suppression, at some point it's going to have to grapple with that as a matter of faith. Jesus wasn't white.
Hmm.
I think intellectually they could probably deal with it, but it's the great gap between, because if you look at all in North America, if you look at, well, not just, if you look at most of the people that we revere, um, the Dalai Lama, or let's go back to the original Buddha, historical Buddha,
Hmm.
Jesus, Moses. Okay, those are the three I mean, there's monotheism. If you look at Hinduism, none of these people are European. And
Hmm.
so we pay all this lip service to how wonderful and beautiful and profound and wise they are. But people who look like that in our country, it makes me think, if these folk came back, how would they be treated? If Jesus came to North America
Hmm.
and he's doing these healings and he's speaking about
Well,
this, that he would probably, we probably wouldn't crucify him this time. That's too crude and too
hmm.
primitive. But I don't think he'd last very long.
No, but first of all, the Mormons would tell you he did come to North America, of course. There's their
No,
version
no
of
question, no
Jesus.
question,
Yes.
no question.
But the problem I've always had with organized religion and including in Christianity, is the fact that the practice of it, the way it plays out in our world, has been so far from the historical character Jesus's his ministry. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
I think perhaps to give one example before we get closer to the UFO topic, is when you look at the AIDS crisis, a few decades back when it first came. I think I would have hoped, I would have expected that to most people of faith, to most Christians, they should have seen this as our age's leprosy. And where was Christ's ministry but in the streets with, the poor, with the lepers, with this sort of thing? But there was little, I mean, there were some exceptions. I'm not sure about Unitarian. Some of the Protestant sects did actually, offer solace and help and
Yes,
some, yes. But by and large, the Christian thing, the fundamentalists, the Roman Catholics, many, this was punishment. This was,
yes. This was
sin.
divine
And
retribution.
and
Yeah.
they seem to forget that basic tenet that Christ's ministry should have been
Well,
there.
it's interesting. The Cornell West, he's a brilliant African American intellectual um, and philosopher. He said that um, Christianity, which is we sometimes referred to as churchianity, Christianity in the United States, not just the United States, but is a state religion. It's much like what Constantine did. He couldn't get rid of Christianity, so he adopted
Hmm.
it and made it the
Hmm.
official religion of Rome. But it became a state religion, had nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus, and so that's what we have here now. We have a one party who wants to make this a theocracy, a Christian nation, but it would probably not be recognized by ancient people who call themselves followers of the way. Your point is well taken. We see it with the immigrant here.
Hmm.
So the Christianity in America has nothing to do with the teachings of Yeshua, who was not a Christian. Obviously, he was a Jew, but this is what's passing for Christianity today. Very disturbing. It reminds me of the story. Someone asked Gandhi what he thought about Christianity. He said, "I think it'd be a very good idea." But no one's really practicing it. And someone asked, I
Yeah,
think they asked him something about what do you think about Western civilization? He said, I think that would be a very good idea.
yeah.
So, it's a mess.
Well,
Yeah,
just
the lowest point, just one quick thing, Justin, before I
yeah.
let you go back to it here. I think the lowest point I once saw on cable, a US TV commercial that said, "What kind of car would Jesus drive today?" And then it went
Oh,
into the commercial, no kidding, you know?
Oh,
yeah.
Lord.
Oh, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. It's embarrassing.
Hmm.
So I
It's
just want to
embarrassing.
pull the conversation back before we lose some of the
Sure.
audience because we're talking about really relevant stuff because this is, a massive part of your life. Now we're going to sort of marry the two because you had your own personal experiences. But before we get that, I want to segue with the concept of the creator by just doing a quick quote from your book, Alien Scriptures. You say something really great here, and we can map this onto the UFO phenomenon, I believe. You say, we might consider broadening our understanding of creator, that a different sense of creator might not be the traditional sense of the word. And any concept that human beings create to describe the ultimate reality will forever fall short. And I
Yeah.
think that is very poignant on how we're looking at the UFO phenomenon, whatever that may entail. Can you sort of talk about that concept of the broadening our senses of what it means for people of faith to
Yeah.
UFOs?
Yeah. And greater minds than I think Einstein said something about the religion of the future, but pardon me. In growing up, we've treated creation, God, if you will, and I always have to qualify it, like a Santa Claus. If
Mhm.
I'm naughty, I'll get punished, and if I'm nice, I get rewarded. That's an infantile. Put it like this, that's really harsh, but it's
Well,
not
I
a
like to think of
mature.
him as like Barry Gibb.
Yeah.
I think Barry,
Okay.
yeah, Barry Gibb in the sky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
It's
concept.
just, it's complicated.
Mhm.
And in some ways, and in some ways it's not. But one thing is for sure, any God that I can define is not God, because the finite can never comprehend the infinite.
Mhm.
And that's what turns people off about orthodox religions, because it's like these people think they have God on speed dial, that they know exactly what God wants. And just because someone said something 5,000 years ago, that means it's true now. And so we're not taught to live with mystery.
Mhm.
One of the wonderful things about some native cultures, First Nations folks here, we look at the Sioux, the Lakota. Uh, Wonkatonkan is what they call the great mystery. We're okay with mystery. We don't have to know all the answers. We don't have to have the certainty. That's what makes it the mysterious and unknown. In the West, here, you have to have the answers.
Mhm.
And so we reduce all the contradictions and the mystery of life to a formula. I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah, I
And
think
we've
the
seen
future of
it in
all
history
good
as well.
thought yeah, I think the future of all good thought is having a gray area. It needs to be more gray so that we're not so dogmatic about our
Yeah,
systems, whether it's
yeah,
scientific
yeah,
or belief based. Yeah. So I listen. I think we all had a problem with the short amount of time we have here together. So I'm trying to get it all in and try to pull it all out of you because I love being here with you. So what I want to do is for everyone that doesn't really understand your background, like I know you have a master's of theology from Union
a union,
Seminary.
yeah, that's yes,
You got a background in Broadway on the side. That's one of your passions. Um, and you've been on Ancient Aliens, which a lot of people will recognize you from. But what I
yes.
want to do, sort of first, Reverend Carter, is just to give us a background of how you even got involved with UFOs. Because I know Reverend Barry Downing, who, our friend Lee Spiegel on Edge of Reality podcast radio has had him on the show and stuff. So let's talk about your relationship with Barry
Oh,
Downing,
Barry, he
how
makes
you
me
were
smile.
inspired.
He makes me
Okay.
smile. Okay, like I said, I grew up in an African American Baptist tradition. Jesus, Lord and Savior, a lot of music, a lot of, that spirit kind of moving. But I realized that, it wasn't as free as it looked. I mean, after the clapping and the singing and all that, it was still kind of us and them. It still works for some people. It still works for my parents. It just didn't work for me anymore. It's a path. I was not into UFOs at all. I just started watching Star Trek about 5 years ago. And I haven't watched. I got hooked on Deep Space Nine. Now I'm hooked on. Why? I don't know, because I used to think, oh, sci-fi. Well, that's not going to happen. We're going to kill ourselves before that happens. So,
We still may.
anyway, when I tell people that, they're like, well, what kind of rock were you hiding under? How can you not have seen it? But no. So, but I started branching out from that traditional Baptist Christian religion. I mean, I got baptized Easter Sunday, 1980, the whole bit, full immersion. But I started reading existential philosophy, Sartre and Camus, and I started reading about this, the occult. What kind of word is that? But metaphysics. That's a better word. Metaphysics and psychic phenomena. I just started going that way, and I started to have some experiences, and I started to leave my religion of origin. I was growing up. A caterpillar was trying to become a butterfly. And so so I was already on a path. I was getting tired of being an actor in New York. I was tired of it. I wanted to serve. I wanted to help. And it's hard to help when you're constantly looking for work. My girlfriend at the time, we went to, who was Jewish. So I was all into the historical Jesus thing. The old Jesus, of the Gospels wasn't working for me. I was just, I was searching. So we went to Mexico. This was in 1989, and I came back. We came back December 28th, 1989. Went to see the pyramids at Chichen Itza and Tulum.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. Like, how did they know? Where were they getting this information? So anyway, I went to a party. When we got to JFK, I wanted to show off. I was really dark, coppery, and the hair was lighter. I didn't have dreadlocks then. I got them in a ponytail now. But I looked good. What can I tell you? I wanted to show off. I wanted to glow. They were freezing in New York. Yeah. She stayed home. I went down to Times Square to the party. Actually, it was in Hell's Kitchen, that area of Manhattan. And so no alcoholic beverages, a lot of food, finger food. I love deviled eggs. I gorged them. I love them. I need a support group, but I remember it. And it was freezing. And so after, they were oohing and eyeing, oh, do you have any pictures? No, not yet. I came home. To this day, I don't know whether I had to get up to go to the bathroom or whatever, but I felt a presence in my room. And when I sleep on my stomach for the most part, now on my side a little, but Sandy, my girlfriend at the time, she didn't wake up. I turned around and there was a being that looked like this.
Wow.
On the side of, now, I had someone make this. He's a Buddha, but he wasn't a Buddha when I saw him. And I'm saying he could have been a she. He had on a jumpsuit. It was a one-piece jumpsuit that looked like Reynolds wrap. It looked like aluminum foil. His head curved more this way. He was about 4 feet tall. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was shutting down. I was so afraid. And Sandy could not wake up. And I'll tell you about that. And so to make a long story short, I looked at him. He looked at me. We were on the 15th floor of the Excelsior Hotel. It's still there, 45 West 81st Street, between Columbus Avenue and Central Park West, right across from the planetarium. I pulled the covers up over my head and I got into the fetal position. I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. I heard this whoosh. I can't do it. It was like the wind was blowing. And it felt like I was outside. I thought I was outside. It was cold. When I pulled the covers down, nobody was there. Now, I woke Sandy up. Interesting, when the latest book that came out, oh, I got it here somewhere. The latest book that I wrote that came out in August, this one for people who are experiencers. It's called Initiation, the Spiritual Transformation of the Experiencer. I sent her a copy and she called me and she said, Michael, I remember that night. I remember you brought back memories. She said, I had never seen you so frightened in all my life. And she said that I remember, she did, seeing these shadowy beings in the room. They were very small. She said, but my mind just said, just go to sleep. It's okay. Just go to sleep. And so that was the beginning of me having these. I had these experiences. I still have them. Last one being in 2019. I had a healing from a healing. They healed a blood clot in my leg. And I started moving more and more away from religion, Orthodox religion. But remember, I was already on it. I got by with less sleep. All of a sudden, I had the urge to become an energy healer, which I did studying Reiki. I felt more intelligent. I got by with less sleep. My hair and nails grew faster. I started the psychic ability, intuitive ability I already had went on steroids being in their presence. So those were the physiological. I just felt more loving. I was like I became a different person. Not that I was Jekyll and Hyde, but I was living in New York, man. I was drugging and drinking and sexing. I was an actor in New York. And then these folks came along and it was like they threw water in my face. They never said, you should not do this. But just by being in their presence and some of the things they did, it made me do an about face. And the spiritual path I was on, they expedited.
Yeah. You asked the question in some of your books, and you've used as a theme, are you experienced? And I have to ask, is that a bit of a homage to Hendrix and his breakthrough album?
Yes, it is.
I was hoping so as a
It is.
guitar player.
It is. I got him right over. I got so many CDs over here with Jimmy, man. Yeah, because are you experienced? Because you don't know. Like I have a lot of friends who fought in Vietnam. Some of them are so scarred. I mean, the things they had to do and the things they saw. Some of them talk about it, some of them don't. But they some of them they're very open with me. That's one of my passions, that war. I'm like an amateur historian about that war. I don't know why I'm drawn to it. But they would say, Michael, you just had to be there. You had to be there. Yeah, because I've never had anybody fire a shot at me in anger, and I surely haven't shot anybody else. I don't want to equate the two, the war experience with this, but it's one of those things like you had to be there in order to know, because I feared for my sanity. I mean, it took me several years. I was in therapy, not for this, but for some family of origin stuff, but this got mixed in. And even to this day, I still, for the most part, like I won't turn the light out until I'm this far from sleep. Because the trauma, not so much of them being bad or what they did or do, it's just that to wake up in the middle of the night and to have someone looking over you. And some of them look like this reptilian person. Some of them look like the praying mantis person. Just the ones who healed me were humanoid, like this blonde brother here. to see that in your room, your windows are locked, your doors are shut, so they touch you, so it's not like this ethereal thing. Your nervous system, my nervous system was overloaded. I was
Yeah.
hyper vigilant.
What you haven't mentioned yet is, do they communicate with you during these experiences?
Yes, they communicated. These brothers and sisters communicated with me, but the and the reptilian did, but they don't talk. It's like I hear them in my head, like telepathy. Like they their mouths don't move. They just kind of look at you, and you can hear it. Like I have a speaker in my head, and the grayish white looking folks with the big heads, they showed me pictures of a past life and of a future event that actually happened. It was me speaking to a large group of people, and that event actually did happen years later. I didn't realize it until afterwards that they let me know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Sure. So at this
go on.
point, Reverend Carter, did you like reach out to people and find like, when you were questioning your
No, I
sanity?
went to mental health people.
Mhm.
um, I remember I went to a place called um, the Open Center. It was a kind of new age place. You could do yoga there. They sold crystals and anyway, it was on Spring Street. And I bought all these books. And I bought a book by Dr. Edith Fiore called Encounters, and it was about experiencers. And in the back, it had a list of mental health professionals. And I remember going up to the cashier, and I wouldn't look at him. It was like I was buying condoms for the first time. It was like, I don't want. And he
Yeah.
looked at me and he said, you don't look good, man." And I said, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." He said, "These books, is this a hobby or is this serious?" And before I answered, he said, "Wait a minute." And he wrote down a number and a name on the back of a business card, gave it to me. He said, "Call them. There's a support group for folks like you." And I
Weird.
called. I
Hmm.
called. And so I was in this group, and I was a group where people who had the experiences thought that they weren't that bad. Like there was some transformation going on. Bud Hopkins, who I knew, who was a friend of mine, and so I was more in like John Mack's camp. Bud Hopkins had a group, and his group was people who had been traumatized, sperm taken, ovum,
Mm.
anal probes, not a pretty picture.
Mm.
They thought we were nuts. We thought they were closed minded. Human beings, man, we know how to split each other up.
Yeah.
And so when I started writing about my experiences after a long time, I was in the closet about it. Um, I just wanted people to know that it didn't. All of them are not these monsters. I grew. I grew as a human being. A lot of gifts that I had, but I grew, and the people I was with grew, and we just wanted people to know that there's three sides to every story. There's yours, mine, and the truth. And so we didn't get together often because they were too traumatized. And I just wanted them. People, everybody doesn't want to sing "Kumbaya." I'm not saying all these people are loving us and they want to hold hands, but I also know that all of them are not these monsters who just want to take over and do
Yeah.
not so great things to you.
Let me ask you just a quick question about your experience too, because like some people might see your experience as more of kind of like and this is not directed at you, just an observation that it's sort of a Stockholm syndrome, right? Here you have these strange creatures showing up in the luminal state, right? You're waking up sort of in the place between dreaming and waking, and there they are, just there. Like, why can't these contact experiences have more of some kind of smooth transition from them not being there to them being there, maybe in
Well,
the daylight in a park? And you do hear those things, but it's
you
just
do, and I just find that human nature that we got to control it. It's got to be in a way that I understand it, and life doesn't work like that. And these beings have been there when I've been wide awake. So it hasn't. So, but this is what I've discovered. For those people who believe, no amount of evidence is necessary. And for those who don't, it's like religion. No amount of evidence will ever be enough.
Okay, that's
So
great. I just
yeah,
just to move with that because I love that.
yeah.
Maybe finish your thought there. I kind of cut you
Well, I was
off.
just going to say millions of people are coming out with these experiences.
Mhm.
So Stockholm syndrome, for millions of people, I'm not buying it, but I do get it that people don't like the change, that this is a lot of high strangeness. There's more questions than answers. But
Mhm.
since our government has come out saying we've spent money and, these TikTok things and whatever, people don't snicker so much now. So I just say, this is what happened to me. If it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, it's all good.
Yeah, and perhaps too, like these encounters at night like that are done that way so that they create a very powerful memory. That's something you can't forget, right? There could be some
Well, listen,
relationship.
I know people who've seen it in broad daylight. I
Yeah.
just have to suspend. The rational mind wants to rationalize.
Mhm.
We talked at the beginning of the show. I got to get answers to this. It's got to
Yeah.
make sense. Life
Yeah.
doesn't work like that. And
Mhm.
so this doesn't work like that. And so I kind of suspend that. People have said to me, well, how come you didn't have a conversation with them? I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah, right.
Well, yes.
Your
Yeah.
whole reality is shattered. Maybe when they
Yeah.
visit you, you have the conversation. But I'm not in control of that. And human beings have to be in control.
Yeah, that's right. And
So
and
I'm just going with the flow.
yeah, and in Alien Scriptures, this is a direct quote from the book. You say, "You're not so interested in the nuts and bolts of the phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, or whatever this is. You're interested in how the contact experience influences the inner life of the contactee." And I think that there is a lot of future in this kind of this philosophy of investigation. Both worlds are necessary to sort of break down the walls and understand what's happening. But I think a huge part that's overlooked and has been overlooked for a long time is that transmutational experience taking place.
Well, I agree. I think in the Western mind, and I'm a man of the West. Don't get me wrong. I love the life of the mind. I don't worship at the altar, but I love the life of the mind. But some places you can't get just from here. You can't get from reason. And that's what this is about. This is what true spirituality is about. You can't think your way into spirituality. What it is changing, but science says, show me and I'll believe. Spirituality says, believe and I'll show you.
Yeah. I think there's some validity to both sides, right? If you look at
Yeah,
if you look at light packets, it's a photon, but if you don't, it's a wave, right? It's quantumly
yeah,
entangled.
yeah.
The
So,
dual.
so I just for me, I'm not wired that way, and I don't want to get into the paralysis of analysis. But there are greater minds than I who are into propulsion systems and back engineering. I leave that to them. My thing is that it's like my friends who are in Vietnam and they survived, at least physically. How am I going to act when I get back to the world? How am I going to take this experience and how am I going to live afterwards? Well, that's to me is a more important question. That after I have seen a greater glimpse of reality, after I have seen that we're not the highest on the food chain, how am I going to live? How am I going to treat my other sentient beings? Because I could have an experience tonight. Guess what? I got to go to work Sunday. I got to pay my bills the end of the month. I've got to integrate this into the life I have today. And
Mm.
I have to walk my walk. I left a lot of friends because in the beginning, because I get it. Because outside of the birth of my child, these are the greatest experiences I've ever had. I mean, yes, there's love. I've been married a couple of times. I got a beautiful partner now. But my point being is that I have to live. And I had people who were that's all they could talk about. If you weren't talking about UFOs, if you weren't talking, that there was nothing else to talk about. And life is too short. So I have to integrate. I love the life of the mind. and you need both. But I do know there's a place where where intellect's not going to take you.
Have you ever had UFO sightings, or just these
I have
encounters with?
not. I have not. Just these encounters.
Interesting.
I
You
thought I
know,
had, but I wound up thinking it was a blimp or something,
Hmm.
or drone.
Mhm.
Michael, one of the things that has really impressed me is when I meet purely secular people, that were not raised to any faith of whatever. And suddenly a UFO experience, some like yours, or sometimes merely a sighting at close
Mhm.
quarters, brought them to that. It's strange, and here's the reason why. When I asked them, I go, well, why would that put you on this path? This is somebody who had no natural, they would describe themselves essentially as an atheist. And how did
Mhm.
a UFO experience put them on that path? And what they would say to you. And sometimes these were people, of just the common man, not with a great education, and sometimes very intellectual. But they would look at me and they'd say, Chris, I knew once I had that experience that everything I have been taught till now is wrong.
Yes, yes.
There,
You
that there
know,
was no room for it, and that's wrong.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
and it would
And
it would open their spiritual self.
it opens you up, but you can have the same thing from an out of body experience, from an NDE. A
Hmm.
therapist I know talks about a time when he was jogging early in the morning in the hills around San Francisco, and he had this peak experience of looking at nature and experience this oneness. All of a sudden, he really got it that I am connected to the insects, to the trees, to all that is. Now, and
Hmm.
then it went away. You can't always live in that heightened state, but once you've had it, as Oliver Wendell Holmes says, once your mind is stretched to a certain dimension, it can't ever go back. And so these are the things. Could be serving in a war zone. And so, but those are things that science can't measure. And so I'm not anti science. I'm really not. I'm just saying that I learned a long time ago. I'm trying to unlearn some of what science is doing because science sometimes can keep you from appreciating these experiences because it's not fitting into your body. See, science can become a religion too in a
Science has become
dysfunctional
a
way.
religion,
Yeah. And
and
so you can't question it.
yeah,
And
and
when you can't question,
at
it's a
some
problem.
point, all these organized religions must have been something so different. They must have been that passion, that
Yeah.
feeling, that need. And I so often when I have actually, and I was always suspicious, because one of the things in the '60s, growing up in the Catholic faith, that you weren't allowed to read the Bible without supervision. They didn't want you to get in and just try to fathom it and reason it yourself. But one of the greatest things that impressed me was when I first, after finished reading the Bible, was reading the Gnostic Gospels. And
Yes.
I quoted them a few times, even in some of my UFO books, in the couple that I co-wrote. And one of the things that always struck me, that sort of drew that line between it in the Gnostic Gospels, is the last verses of the book of St. Thomas, where the apostles ask Christ, "When will we see the kingdom of the Father?" And Jesus says to them, "They'll say it is here, and men will say it is there. Look in
Right.
a tree and look under a rock." It goes, "But it is not there. The kingdom of the Father is all around. Men don't see it."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was so on point. It was so much more like Dylan or something than organized religion, and it spoke to me. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
have to have the experience. It's based on the feeling. It's not three Our Fathers and two Hail Marys.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yes.
deliberately
Yes.
omitted too for their own propaganda, monetary gain,
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah. And I, you've got to. But I want to be clear to our listeners. At least for me, I'm not bashing religion. I know my parents are very good people. They're very religious people. I know people who are religious people, and they walk their talk. But what religion has become uh, and is what we're talking about. That it's been used to coerce and control. That's what we're talking about. Not talking
Mm,
about. At least I'm not talking about bad mouthing religion.
Yeah.
And things can be. You can have two rights. you know, what we're saying is right and what other folks are saying who would defend religion. You can have two rights. That's what's harder to navigate when both sides have points. But I grew up not thinking that, you know, now I'll put it like this, you know, to me, the Bible is many things. The Quran is many things. And one of those things is a book of UFO stories.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
put it like that. Doesn't take away from Jesus or his mission, doesn't take away from Moses or Muhammad, but I think our ancestors were trying to tell us in the vernacular, in the vocabulary of their day, using the nomenclature they could use, that they were having interactions with off-world intelligences.
Okay, in the interest of time, we've got 10 minutes left in the show already. So obviously, if you're willing, we'd love to have you back. But there's two things
Yes.
I
Yeah.
want to hit up before we finish the show. Maybe an example of that, of those stories within the scriptures. And also, I want to move to your experience with ancient aliens and how that even transpired. So let's get an example
Okay,
of what these
I'll give you
stories were.
two quick examples. The first one is the Exorcist story. There's no Jewish religion, very crucial, because there's
Mm.
no Jewish religion until Exodus. There's none. They're just a ragtag bunch of folks fleeing. Pharaoh was an a-hole, and he was a fascist, and he was a mess. And say we got to get out of this guy is crazy. So they flee. But what are they following? The definition of a UFO. It's unidentified, it's flying, it camps out, it feeds them the mono, whatever they're throwing them down, whatever they're
Hmm.
taking. And in the day, it's in a cloud, the pillar of cloud by day. We know UFO stories today, they camouflage in clouds. Sometimes they hide in clouds. At night, they can follow it. The pillar of fire by night, it's a light
Mhm,
in the sky. It's unidentified, it's intelligent, they're flying. They're saying this is how we became Jews.
mhm.
There's a UFO element to that.
Yes.
Jesus, he leaves on a cloud. Okay? He leaves on a cloud, man. And they know our ancestors weren't dumb. They know that, oh, wait, he's sitting on a cloud playing a harp. That's what they could use. A light shines on a manger. We know that lights don't shine, that stars don't move. You want to talk about upheaval, tsunamis, the gravitational pull of the earth. But this light, they follow it. They say it's a star. Of course, it could look like a star. It hovers over a manger. It reminds me of Buddhism in the sense that these three wise people from the East come along, and when they're looking for new Buddhas, when they know there's a great soul born, they do this to this day. What do? They send. They send their priests. They send their monks to investigate.
Mhm.
But that's a whole other thing. And
Yeah.
Jesus says in John, my kingdom is not of this world. He's telling you. That's why he says, if I speak to you, when he talks to Nicodemus, if I speak to you of earthly things and you're not getting it, how are you going to get it, Nicodemus, if I speak to you of heavenly things?
Mhm.
I, I
He's
I like in
showing
that
you,
period the burning bush. He appears to give messages as a burning bush.
oh, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
So we can
You know.
explore that the next time, but definitely they're off-world intelligences. The chariot, Ezekiel, seeing the
Yeah.
wheel,
Mm.
flying chariots. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Genesis 6:4. Yeah.
My kingdom
ancient
has many
aliens,
houses.
ancient aliens. It was like, I was a chaplain at no, I just got moved to their diversity department. I was heading up their diversity department, but I was a chaplain at this hospital. And I had written alien scriptures. And I was doing, some conferences here and there, asked to speak, some radio shows. And I got a call. I forget the producer's name. Well, he's no longer there, and their producers come and go. And he said, whoever he said he was, I probably haven't written down. And he said, is this Reverend Michael Carter? I said, yeah. He said, I have your book here, Alien Scriptures. It's fascinating. I'm doing a show called Ancient Aliens, and we want to know, will you be a guest? And we would fly you out and to LA because they shoot in LA and New York, but mostly LA now. Um, and I started going on there maybe twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. Um, What I will tell you is that when we talked about African Americans and folk of color, it gave me a lot of visibility. And I started meeting more and more people of color who were saying, hey, it's about time they had a brother on the show. But, or as they say, it was about time they had some flavor on the show. But
Yeah.
my point being is that a lot of these folks had experiences, but they had no place to go either. You're not going to go to your Baptist minister saying what you're saying because they're going to say, A, you're crazy. B, I'll pray for you. And C, it's a demon. Because
Yeah.
whatever we don't understand, we demonize.
Hmm. That's right. Wow. I mean, we definitely need to do another show because, like, we really only covered alien scriptures.
Yeah, and I can go. I brought my Bibles with me, and even apocryphal stuff. I mean, the Book of Jubilees,
Yeah.
the Book of Enoch. They're talking about the Watchers. If you put, and Barry talks about it too. If you put extraterrestrial in every place you see angel in the
Mhm.
Bible makes more sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
I was lucky when I was young as a bad little Catholic brat that I made friends with a young rabbi, and he was such great help to me. It broadened my horizon. And I remember, after a bunch of questions one day, he got up because he'd had his fill of them, and he looked at me and he said, "Chris," he said, "if you really want to learn more about Jesus and you really want to learn more about the Virgin Mary, read the Quran." And I thought he
yeah,
was kidding. And when I finally did that, I was shocked. And he
yeah,
said, if you really want to find about how God worked in my time and in the days of the Old Testament, he said, read Eric von Daniken.
yeah, yeah,
And that took
yeah.
me a few more years to get
Yeah,
to and a
Eric
little
Eric
harder
is
to
yeah,
accept. But
he started all this.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a good guy too. I spent some time with him on the set there. He's a real good guy. What you see
well,
is what you get with Eric.
I'm going to go so far right now to say not only should we have you on the show down the road again, but I'd like to put you into a double slot and keep you for a couple hours.
Yeah. Listen, I was prepared
Yeah.
to. I thought we were on from 12 to 2. That's why I brought my little friends. That's why I brought all these Bibles and extra. I
Well,
brought the Book of Josephus, so we could kind of put some historical context to this.
yeah.
But listen, we can do it another time when
Let's
we
do it
sign
another
off.
time and
Yeah, let's
introduce
talk
all
about.
your friends. Look, it's fascinating.
It's beautiful, and we're living in the time now where this is not taboo. Perfect timing, and
Hmm.
we're going to start talking and hearing about things that we weren't even allowed to think about as
It's
we
a
go
very
further and
exciting,
further into the
very exciting
Aquarian
era.
age.
That's
Yes.
right. I just want to thank you from all of us here at the show, FSUFO, for coming and spending time with us. We can't wait to do it again. For all of our friends out there in the world, help us keep our show in outer space, but our feet planted firmly here on the earth by liking, subscribing, and commenting on the YouTube channel. That's all from us at FSUFO. Thank you, Reverend Carter. And as always, Chris, you're the most